Hi, I'm John Rurkowski, and really honored to be uh, joined today by Jim Mcelaney. Jim, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for taking a few moments and chatting today about franchising and franchise opportunities and how to get, to purchase a franchise. But before we get to a few questions, why don't you give me a little background about yourself, where you're from, a little bit of history of your career up to this point.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I'm sort of a classic example of the person that FranNet helped. So I'm a corporate refugee, but prior to that, I grew up in New York City. Spent most of my life, actually, my career in the U.S. in the Boston area, and then company I was with, I was in the financial services industry. Got transferred overseas. 3 years turned into 9. When it was time to come back, I found my way into the Tampa Bay area, which has been fantastic. So I've been here 8 years. And yeah, so that's a bit of what got me to this area. And now I'm helping people in the franchise space down here and enjoying all the good things we have in the Tampa Bay area.
Wonderful. Well, good. Well, thank you, Jim, and congratulations on all your success up to this point. And I'm sure it's hard for many people to break away from the corporate world. They're stuck in that arena and maybe afraid to make a move. So that's why I find it very interesting on how you transition from that world into franchise. So let's talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah.
how did you get into the franchise space?
So I was that person that was stuck, right? So when it was time for me to relocate back to the US, I had some great opportunities with my company to stay with them, to go into corporate headquarters, to be in meetings all day, every day. And I just wasn't feeling it. And I thought if I don't take this opportunity now, I really felt like I was at an inflection point. And I actually was a client of FranNet. So the group that I consult with and help others now, I was their client back in 2015. And through the FriendNet process, I got in touch with my goals, my ambitions, my transferable skills, and I started to look at a range of franchise opportunities myself. And none of them were businesses that I ever thought I would see myself in. But when I started to see what the business model looked like and the role I had been thinking about for myself in a business, I saw how every one of them lined up. So then it was really just a matter of going through the process of research and making my choice. And I ended up becoming a multi-unit operator in the supercut system. So the hair people, right? So I
So
went from
yeah, I
financial
guess you never,
services to
yeah, I guess
hair.
you never
And what
know.
did I know about hair?
Right, exactly. I guess you never know what may be a good fit for a potential franchise owner. So how does FranNet work? I'm guessing if you're sitting down talking to a potential purchaser into a franchise, what do you do? What do you like to do? What's your budget, etc.? So explain, what does FranNet do?
Yeah. So FranNet, really, we do two things in our market. We don't sell anything, right? The first thing we do is we educate. So we're a resource for education around business ownership and specifically the franchise model within business ownership. The second thing we do is we will help people through a process and create introductions for them to franchises that might meet their goals. So the early days of my conversations with my clients is never, ever about any individual franchise. It's really trying to understand, what's motivating them at this point in life to potentially make, as you pointed out, a very big change, right? To help them think about whether business ownership is the right match for them. Franchises are all about systems. So even if business ownership is great, now the secondary question is, are you someone who's going to follow a system? Because when I do make those introductions, I want to be bringing qualified candidates to the franchises whom I introduce to. So that's a lot about what I do in terms of helping my clients.
So I get the sense it's almost like you're a broker finding the right candidate for the right franchise. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. The term broker, the term consultant is used in our industry. I kiddingly, so you've heard me say, I say I'm like eHarmony for business, but with a better outcome, right? So that's really, and when I say that, people get it, right? They
Yeah.
understand. And that's what we try to do, right? Is it's try to match up and help people through these transitions and help them create success for themselves and in business ownership out the other side.
Wonderful. Would you say you have a typical type of client that you're trying to help?
Yeah, there's several, right? I would say the example I used early on here, where I said I'm an example. So someone who's consciously left corporate America on their own or is thinking about it, they can use FriendNet as a resource to help them think about what their options could be in business ownership. These days, the trend is sadly more around people exiting corporate, not necessarily through their own volition, right? So people who have been displaced, downsized, overlooked from promotions. I hear a lot of that from folks these days. And so they're, of course, a candidate I can help. But interestingly, there's a lot of opportunities in franchising for people to own a business and have them play what we call an owner executive role, where they're not stepping away from what they do day to day. But what they are doing is they're managing a manager who's looking after that second business, that franchise for them, and they're creating an additional income stream. So I'm seeing more of that as well. So not necessarily the radical change of someone leaving something behind, but actually someone who's looking to actually pen something else alongside what they already do.
I may want to talk to you about some opportunities for myself too, because, as we get into our 50s and 60s, we need to start looking at different opportunities just in case. So I think down the road here, maybe we can meet for a cup of coffee between you and I and talk about some opportunities.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
Great. What are some common myths about franchises that people may not know or?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think I always hear people say when I say I'm in the franchise space is they immediately go to food, right? What everyone recognizes about franchise is food. And a lot of times I hear, how do I get a Chick-fil-A? Because everyone sees those lines around the Chick-fil-A, right? And the food business isn't a bad business, don't get me wrong, but it's not the only business in franchising. In fact, there's probably 70 to 80 different industries that franchising serves. So, and sometimes we don't even realize that the brand that's down on Main Street where we live happens to be a franchise, right? We know the local owner, he or she has done a great job embedding in the community. And yeah, they happen to be part of a franchise system, but we don't always know that, right? So I think the first myth is there are a lot more industries out there than people originally think. Second myth is people sometimes come to me and they say, but Jim, I don't know anything about that business. And the reality is you don't have to have experience in the industry. That's what you're paying the franchisor for, is for them to help train you and skill you in what you need to know about that business. What they are looking for is for you to have good business skills, financial acumen, leadership, communication, right? All the things that we sharpen and work on all the times, no matter what industry we come from, is actually transferable into franchising. So experience is probably myth number two. And I think myth number three is around investment level. Everyone thinks they have to have millions of dollars. I'm connecting clients to franchises that the total investment to get started is 5 figures, right? So it's under $100,000. Those are going to look like home-based businesses, maybe solopreneur type businesses. But, from there up, I would say the average business that I introduced to, probably the average entry cost is somewhere between 150 and 300,000. And a lot of that can be financed through the financing partners that we work with as well. So I think franchising is more attainable than many people think in terms of whether they have the capital and the financial wherewithal.
Yeah, very interesting. I would always assume with franchises that the more lucrative a franchise is, the more it would cost to get into one. I would guess that's true. Yes or no?
Not necessarily. No, actually, there isn't necessarily a relationship between the all-in cost and what the franchise will perform for you. And one of the great things about franchising, and this is where I think the government does help us, is franchising is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And so there's an awful lot of transparency and disclosure of what you have the potential to make in a franchise, whether it be in the disclosure documents or the connections that the franchisor will make for you with existing owners already in that system. So validating what your potential is, and also confirming that it doesn't necessarily correlate with the investment level. Those are all things that my candidates can find out as they go through their journey of discovery.
Very interesting. I knew that I was vacationing with a friend, and they had a couple other couples that were joining us down there, and they owned a couple of the Tim Horton coffee franchises up in where it started in Western New York, where I'm from. But I heard that those were extremely expensive. I'm thinking, wow, you got to sell a lot of coffee just to cover that.
And they do.
They do. I know they do. Obviously, there's more Tim Hortons up there than any other coffee, like a Dunkin' or Starbucks.
Absolutely.
And Jim, finally, are you seeing any trends currently right now in the franchise world?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that come to mind. There's I mentioned before, there's a lot of industries that can be covered. I see both candidates looking at business to business concepts as well as business to consumer concepts. So, they're both there. But I think couple of trends that I'm seeing right now is recession resistant, right? Everyone is wondering, are we, aren't we? So they're trying to get their arms around concepts that are going to perform in markets no matter what the economic cycle is. So if you think about it, some examples of that might be businesses that serve certain demographics. Two of my last two client placements have been candidates that have gone from interesting financial services into the senior care space. Right, we're going to age. I mean, we all know that the numbers around, how many people are turning 65 each day. There's a demand for senior care businesses and businesses serving seniors across a whole range of needs that will outpace and will withstand any recession because we're just aging, right? I think home services, right? A couple of years ago, home services has been a really strong space in franchising. So think about anything to do with maintaining, upgrading, enhancing, repairing in your home. It started out a couple of years ago where we were all home more. So we saw the stuff that we never saw when we came home at night after the sunset. But now I think where it's shifting and why home services is still a strong category is people are reconciling themselves to the fact that they're staying in these homes longer than maybe they thought. Maybe it's because of interest rates. Maybe it's availability in their community. And so now we're trying to do something to dress up our home and make it fall in love with it all over again. So businesses in the home services space that really help homeowners, fall in love and enjoy the space they live in and maintain it too, of course. Great businesses, convenience businesses. Think about all the things we do these days that are built around a convenience for us. So I have a client looking right now at a tutoring business that happens to be a virtual and in-home tutoring. So a substitute for driving the young person in your family to a center, picking them up later. This is all about bring the tutor to me, right? Or mobile pet grooming. People can't get into groomers. Groomers are actually building businesses where they'll come to you. They'll do the service in an air-conditioned van that's in your driveway. Fluffy won't have to deal with all the barking of other dogs and everything else. So convenience businesses are definitely another trend I see, John.
Interesting. Well, Jim, I think this is extraordinarily interesting, and I'm going to be glad to share your information with everyone that I know, and I might be a client as well. You never know. But before we go, please share the best way for people to get a hold of you.
Sure. Yep. So first thing I would say is if anyone's interested in learning more, start with frannet.com. Our website is, I mentioned before, we're big in the education space. There's a ton of resources there for someone who's just trying to figure it all out. But then you can drill down and you can come to me, or you can send me an email at jmcelaney, MCELENEY @frannet.com. And I'd be happy to talk to you. We work on no cost and no obligation. So it's a free service to help you think about whether franchising is a path for you. I'd love to help anybody that's either contemplating or thinking that they have a transition coming up.
Thank you, Jim. And I'll make sure I share all your contact information within the
Thanks, John.
body of this video that we'll share with all our colleagues.
Awesome.
Jim, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, good to see you.
It was very educational, and it is interesting. I'm thinking when you're driving down a road into a town that you don't know, you stop at and I think the power of franchises. Do you stop at the mom and pop diner, or do you go to Cracker Barrel? Whether you like Cracker Barrel or not, just as an example. But I think there's a tendency to go to a place that you've been before versus some place that you haven't.
Absolutely.
Right? Yep. And that's part of the beauty of being in a franchise.
For owners, the same thing, right? Owners basically get a business that they know has already been proven out there. They're not starting from scratch. So it's a win-win for consumers, as you point out, as well as business owners. Thanks for the opportunity here.
Jim, my pleasure. Make it a great day to all our colleagues and friends out there. Be well. I'm John Rurkowski, joined today by Jim Mcelaney. And I hope you take him up on his offer for a free consultation for a franchise opportunity. All the best, my friends. Have a good day.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome, Jim.